Hi, I'm Monalisa from Palestine. We host film screenings in reference to Palestine and Israel and its occupying forces. We do this through discussions, panels, networking events where we host a screening and talk about the topic of the film or the topic of what the community would like to discuss. Most recently, we hosted one for No Other Land. It was really good. We had a sold out house. We had a panel discussion talking about what's currently going on. And I'd like to add to those who don't know or are curious on this topic that most recently, we're going on almost, I believe, like 60 days of the food and water deprivation and medical care deprivation of Palestinians since the middle of Ramadan. It's been very difficult for a lot of us to witness the forced starvation, including the ongoing settler violence in the West Bank. Most recently, the Knesset has decided they will be fully occupying Palestine and implementing some type of martial law over the people, actively displacing 1.5 million Palestinians who are already starving, already sick. Most recently, this afternoon, there was a cafe that was bombed, and children were holding coffee cups, and coffee caravans were found with bullet wounds in their heads. It's very difficult to look at a world where we claim there's democracy and we claim there's freedom and liberties, and we're seeing Palestinian children, human beings, just be completely just genocided, like murdered. And I really don't know what else we could possibly show or exhibit or display. So I do encourage people to really look beyond what we're being seen and look at different authors. Um, in regards to Palestine, I will drop some in the, I guess, the comment group. A couple of authors, people like A 1,000 Year War by Khalid Rashid, really good. Highlights the ongoing colonial occupation and expansion and what's been going on since before the current occupation in place. We're talking about like late 1800, early 1900. Um, if anyone has any questions, please, I mean, if we can have them in the comments or privately message the host, I'd gladly answer them.
Miigwech, Lindsay, and Miigwech, Monalisa, and welcome, Moriel. And I'd like to begin with a poem that I wrote. It's called Today. Today, my heart is unable to soar. Today, my heart weeps for the innocent, both Palestinian and Israeli, who have been slaughtered, burnt, and crippled since the oppression of the Palestinians began in 1948. Today, my heart sinks in the blood of the innocent. Today, I am aware that Creator watches in a small area of land called Gaza. As 2.5 million people continue to endure unimaginable terror. Today, my heart calls out to the world for answers. I feel alone. I scream. Why is this barbarism allowed to continue? Today, I am aware that what is happening now to the innocent shall never be forgotten. I wrote that a little bit ago, and I want to say about the dead in all the deaths that have occurred since 1948, and I wonder, as a grandfather and as a dad, and I wonder if how I would feel if my daughters or my grandchildren, or my brothers and sisters, how would I feel? Um, how would I come to terms with the fact that they had been killed by bombs and by gunfire? And I know me. I know how my mind works, and I know that I might be alive and walking around, but emotionally, I would be dead.
Yeah.
I would be dead, and but would I be counted among the dead? Um, I when I worked at a maximum security prison, a young inmate who was only 19, and he told me that he was Indigenous from Manitoulin Island, and he told me one day, he said that he died emotionally when he was 17. And I understood right away what he was talking about, because some things happen in life that are so crippling that you really are dead emotionally. And if you're a human being and you don't feel emotions anymore, are you what's left? Is that really a human being? I don't. For my definition of what a human being is, uh, I don't think so. And how could anybody living in a small area like Gaza, and knowing that every bomb that falls, you don't have to wonder if there's children dying as a result of it. You know it. How does that affect you? When you go to sleep at night, and you wonder whether you'll be alive the next day. Um, so that it's hard to take, and and then to look at the world, and you see the world leaders, and you see the media of the world, and these things are happening, and not very many people care, and those who care, maybe a lot of them don't care enough. I think about these things, and uh, about protesting, and the right to protest, the right to dissent. And I know that the Pope just passed away recently, and he was the only world leader that ever uh, said, acknowledged that there was a genocide that took place in Canada, which is Turtle Island, on Turtle Island. And I didn't need the Pope to tell me that. I knew it already had happened, because the Algonquins came so close to disappearing, um, and and while we were disappearing, there was no settlers that came from Europe in those days on the streets protesting to the government about the genocide of our people. As a matter of fact, the settlers of those days were okay with it, because they knew that whenever we were gone, forever gone from these resource-rich lands, that the settlers would take over and be able to pillage and rape those resources without any interference from the indigenous peoples. Um, so when protesting happens now to protest the plight of what's happening to the Palestinians, I'm comforted knowing that people care enough to do so. I I um, because honestly, if there was no protesting, I would be worried that the genocide that occurred to the indigenous peoples in this country might take root again, might start up again. Because if the world is okay with the massacring and slaughtering of innocent people in Palestine, then what wouldn't they be okay with? I think it's a statement that warmongers are capable of anything. That what they call the almighty dollar is can influence and buy politicians and just propaganda to be used and make the person who throws stones the barbarian. Um, it's uh, it's difficult to understand and to process. I I, um, I worry so much about what's becoming of this world that we live in. Mm, if such atrocities happen, and Palestine has a right. The Palestinians have a right to live. They're not rich people. Maybe if they warred and they had resources and stuff and had their military and bombs and planes and stuff to defend themselves with, they'd be able to influence and buy politicians too. But they don't. And I think so. This conversation we're going to have now, I want people not to be afraid to speak their minds. If you think I said something that's out of line, then say so, and we'll have a talk about it. I think it should be discussed more, and it should be what is happening uh, needs to be told. The story needs to be told. I hope I live to see the day that there's going to be a monument in Canada for the innocent Palestinian children who died. That would be the right thing to do because Canada is complicit. Uh, they should be ashamed of themselves. Canadian tax dollars going towards the murder of children, and those big shot politicians from the United States who went to Israel and actually autographed 1,000 and 2,000 pound bombs, put their names on it. Like, what kind of a human being does something like that? They may as well have sold their soul to the devil right there, or condemned their soul, I should say, by such an act. These people can't think. They don't seem to have the ability to see what lays ahead for them when they physically die. They claim to believe that they have spiritual beliefs and that they claim to believe they have a soul, but their actions prove otherwise. How is somebody like that going to be rewarded in the next life? Anyway, that's what I have to say, and I hope that, like I said, we're here, and people could say to me, Albert, I think you're wrong. and you have a right to do that. Make wetch.
Thank you, Albert, for your words. As always, they're beautiful and set a beautiful path for us. And Moriel, it's you now.
Okay. Thank you, Albert. Thank you, Monalisa. Shukran. يعطيك العافية. And thank you, Lindsay, for having me here. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'll start by reading a passage from my novel. This is Sadness is a White Bird. In most readings, I wouldn't read from this section because this is sort of later in the book and it contains plot elements that, spoil the surprise. But actually, I think there is a kind of urgency to this moment that perhaps, for this moment is calling me to read from a section where I'll tell you some of the plot aspects, and we'll see if the book can say something to today, as Albert put it so beautifully in his poem. I mean, we're talking about today. So this book, all you need to know for now is Jonathan, the narrator, is an Israeli soldier, and he has just gotten notice that at a demonstration he has shot and killed someone who he believes is his friend Laith, who's a Palestinian, his friend and beloved. And then after he goes home for the weekend, he goes back to his base, and that's where I'll read this short section. When I arrived back on base, Tal, Eviad, and Gadi looked at me like I was made out of glass. You okay, Yonatan? Eviad said. The way their hands touched my shoulders and my nape was tender and awful, so I pulled away and walked past them into our bunk. We'll see you at breakfast, Yonatan, Tal called out behind me. I slumped down to sit on the edge of the bed and put my head between my hands. I squeezed as hard as I could and listened to my own breathing. Every breath sounded like your name, Laith, 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 Laith. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my saved messages until I got to the second one you sent me on my draft date. Laith. Did you feel sad? I asked. Cutting me off, he said, Mahmoud, my friend, sadness is a white bird that does not come near a battlefield. And that's a line from a Mahmoud Darwish poem that Laith has texted Jonathan in snippets. Sadness is a white bird that does not come near a battlefield. Before I knew what I was doing, before I could think too much, I clicked on the new message button and typed in your name, Laith. Me. Laith, I'm so sad. Help me, Laith. I miss you. I'm so sorry. Then I stood up and placed my phone gently in my palm like a small, fragile bird. In a single motion, I smashed it, face first against the wall. Plastic crunched against the concrete. I smashed it twice more and then let it fall to the ground. I climbed back into the bottom bunk and lay down, my gun cuddled next to me like a skinny metal doll. The grenade launcher nuzzled into my rib cage. I stared at the springs above me. I didn't move. I wasn't sure how long I'd been lying there when I heard the door open. I glanced up, hopeful that maybe one of the guys had returned to help me, to pull me out of this, or at least to try, but it was not Tal or Gadi or Eviad. It was the commander. He sat down on the bunk across from where I lay. I glanced over and saw that his gray eyes looked tired in the dim light of the room. Aside from his eyes, though, he still gave off an aura of agelessness, the same aura that had so impressed me when I'd first arrived on base. Now, though, as he sat in silence across from me, he struck me as more mechanical than godly. I was frightened. Soldier, he said, his tone gentle. You okay? I didn't say anything and looked back up at the springs above me. Soldier, look at me. I rolled my head toward the commander. My eyeballs felt heavy in their sockets. I scanned his face and noticed a few hairs that he had failed to shave sprouting by the base of his nose. If these hairs were there, if he wasn't infallible, then maybe he had lied to me before. Was that possible? These hairs gave me hope, gave me voice. We're doing not good things, I said. What did you say? I said, we're doing not good things. I thought I could be good, but I couldn't. Did you lie to me earlier or didn't you? Is he dead or isn't he? Soldier, get up. This is an order. The commander's tone was back to being diamond hard, steel hard. There was no more softness, no more patience. Get up now. No, I said, and stop calling me soldier. I have a name. You know my name. I'm going to pause there. Um, I wanted to read this section. This section came to me um, because it's the section that details Jonathan's death. This is in some ways a book about Jonathan's death. And like Albert said, although in a different way, Jonathan doesn't die in body in this book. His body works, he continues to breathe, he continues to eat, drink, defecate, speak, move, open his eyes, close his eyes, but he has died. He has died and he was killed. I want to say it like that too. I have a 7-year-old daughter. Um, and like Albert, I imagine my mind puts up these walls, right? My mind doesn't allow me to imagine all the time what it would be like to be with my daughter right now in Khan Yunis, in Rafah, in Wadi Gaza, anywhere in the Gaza Strip. My mind oftentimes blocks it because it's too hard. It's too the I can't even fully form the sentences. And yet that is the beginning of any kind of moral imperative to imagine yourself in another's position. And so I think Albert is absolutely right. Were my daughter to be bombed and were I to survive in body, I would be dead. I would be walking around, but I would be dead. But so too, I think it's true also, were I to have bombed Albert's daughter, were I to have bombed my own daughter, were I to have bombed the young children Monalisa mentioned at the coffee shop, um, holding cups of coffee today or yesterday, in Gaza. That too, I think, would be a kind of death. Um, and so in some sense, there is a murder done to soldiers, right? Soldiers are murdered when we send them to be soldiers, whether or not they die. Right? When we send a soldier to kill, when we send a soldier to kill a family, when we send a soldier to kill a child, when we send a soldier to kill tens of thousands of people, we are killing that soldier in spirit. We are killing that, if not in body, then in spirit. Um, and so we are in this moment where we are surrounding ourselves with the walking dead. How do we bring our brothers and sisters back to life? I don't know. Um, I don't know. I think I also wanted to read this passage because of the line where Jonathan texts his friend and he says, Laith, I'm so sad. Because I think oftentimes I can lose track of the clarity of sadness. Um, it's easier, it's sometimes more comfortable to get angry. I feel there's a safety in figuring out who I'm angry at. And I do feel angry a lot of the time. But I think anger is also covering up the sadness that is so great that if I feel like if I let it out, I can barely breathe. Um, and I also read this passage because it's a passage in which Jonathan tries to keep living, in which he says to his commander, right, not in the most eloquent way, he hasn't yet learned the language of settler colonialism. He hasn't yet learned the language of military occupation. He hasn't yet learned the language of apartheid and of 100 Years' War. But he says to his commander, we're doing not good things. His soldier tells him to get up. His commander tells him to get up, and he says no. The commander calls him again by his name, calls him soldier, and he says, my name is not soldier. I have a name. You know my name. And I think that's all I can really hold on to right now is how do we search for moments in which we can go limp? Um, if I don't know how, and like Mona Lisa said, I don't know how to stop the machines. I don't know how to stop the warplanes. I feel helpless. But I think also there, how do we look in all moments of our life? How do we at least, at very least, find ways to not comply, right? To not stand in our position, and whatever that position is for each of us, right? Maybe many of us on this call, maybe no one, maybe many of us haven't been drafted into militaries, um, or don't have the immediate lived experience of saying, will you or will you not be a soldier? And I don't know, maybe some have, but I think there's a way in which all of us are told at some points, at many points in our day, be a good soldier, right? And is that a soldier for empire? Is that a soldier for capitalism? Is that a soldier for the separation that allows, you know, um, confused men to sign their names on a bomb that is going to tear human bodies into pieces? How do we find ways in our day to day, in our moment to moment, to not comply? Right. And I think like Albert said, there's a way in which this non-compliance is a growing urgency everywhere in our world. I mean, I'm calling all of you from south of the man-made border. Um, and here too, I believe that soon and already non-compliance will become an act of extreme urgency. Um, so I think I want to pause there just with these notes, with these three notes of what is it to be among the living dead, and to have the living dead be our beloveds too, right? Um, what is it to allow sadness when anger or numbness are the easier options? And what is it to search for avenues of non-compliance in our day-to-day life?
Thank you, Maria. That was beautiful. And those words, I barely can hear you speak because reading them was so powerful in your book that I have read twice. Yeah, and hearing it was even more touching to the heart. Thank you. And Albert, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kichi Miigwech, Moriel. I uh, I really want to meet you someday. I want to shake your hand, and I just want to you to see the passion in my eyes when I greet you, and hopefully you will accept my friendship. You know, I think uh, there's a connection, a human connection. As a human being knows about empathy and about what it is to do what's right, and you get it, and I hope I could say the same for myself. Um, yeah, and you know, when I think about the past, and I think about the fur trade as an example, that that was here in those early times, whenever contact was made with Europeans, and the way that I feel about animals, there's no way I would have been able to be a trapper. It's just not in me to do it. No matter what the rewards were, I would do it out, because there's no, I just couldn't do that to animals. All my relations, as we call them, you know, to trap them in the leg hole trap and kill them and skin them, and then go to some business person and sell the height of your relative. It's just wrong. So I understand about today when soldiers are called upon to kill other human beings. They're not animals; they're human beings, and the toll it must take if somebody's got a conscience. It's the things that were done on the battlefield or done in the name of a war haunts that person forever, no matter how old they live.
Yeah.
And that's they have to live with it. And me, I couldn't,
Yeah.
and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it I love eating partridge, but there's no way I'm going to ever kill a partridge again. I don't mind when a hunter brings me a partridge and say, "Oh, I got a partridge and here's a gift." I will gladly accept it and have a partridge soup, and that's the way it is. And um, some people, though, are just incapable of any kind of violence, and I'm happy that I'm such a person. I and I wish there was more people who renounced warfare and killing of innocent people. I like the protest songs of the 1960s, sung by all these singers that were internationally known. And I like watching those songs are being sung at concerts in the 60s and seeing how the what they were calling the flower children who were all about love and peace. We need more love and we need more peace. So anyway, I'll just turn it back to you, Lindsay, and whatever you think is next.
Thank you. I see Monalisa, you turned your camera back on. Do you want to jump in? You are muted. There we go. Okay.
Of course I do. I wanted to just pop on and say that one thing we really need to focus on is, and this is a very controversial take for a lot of like different Palestinians, but for me personally, before the occupation, before colonization, Jews and Muslims and Christians in Palestine lived in harmony together. Like my ancestors, my grandparents told me this. And you look at it like a lot of people need to decenter it away from like a religious kind of context. I know no one mentioned it, but we need to emphasize that community was always at the core of like being Palestinian, being Arab, or in general, our communities before any form of colonial or imperial expansion had such unity, such community. And I feel we need to kind of push past uncomfortable emotions and connections to come to the root cause of if we work together, like we boycott, divest, and sanction in unison, different companies, we divest our education systems from Zionist propaganda or rhetoric, we further create community because I'm speaking as a person who's actively part of like participating in the school board. I recently attended an ACE meeting where I think a member had wanted to ban the kufiye, saying it was anti-Semitic. And this specific member had a history of being very anti-Palestinian, anti-Islamophobic. And I've known about the kufiye since my grandfather, who's older than the state of Israel, knew like had a kufiye. So what part of like what we're currently seeing is such a suppression of Palestinian identity and culture. And it's incredibly discouraging. But I find strength in the community around me with the people who agree that occupation, racism, hatred towards specific indigenous or ethnic groups have to stop, that we have always been neighbors here on Turtle Island or around the world, and that camaraderie and community really, really solidifies who we are and who we should continue being. I mean, yeah. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'm sorry.
Beautiful. Thank you. And should we go back to Moriel then?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's powerful to hear you speak, Albert, about what you see as your inability to trap and kill an innocent being. Um, I think, I think in that sense, at least in moments in my own past, you and I are different, in the sense that I actually know that exists in me a part that would have been able to kill. Um, right? I don't think the part of me would be able to sort of stand in front of a human being, look them in the eyes, and then kill them. But I do think that if I were brought along with my unit in the military, told those people over there, right, over that ridge, in that building who you don't see, um, in that tent where you can't look into their eyes, um, and told, shoot, press the trigger, drop the bomb, I think there is a version of me that would have been able to do it. And I feel so grateful to have been brought in by teachers, by friends, um, by Palestinian teachers and activists who saw the part in me that would not shoot a person standing 2 meters away from me and uplifted that part in me, even if I was still working within the the brainwash of nationalism, even if I was still working within the paradigms of us versus them. And that's, I think, this sense that and this is a hard ask. And I don't even know if it's an ask, but it's just sort of like it's a testimony from my own life. The sense that just to recall that if we boycott these corporations, we are doing that on behalf of Israelis as well. And it sounds paradoxical. Most people won't believe you when you say that. Most people won't believe you when you say, I am calling for a boycott of Israeli products or the divestment from Israel bonds or sanctions against the state of Israel, all of which I, as an Israeli citizen, see as for me too, right? Because we also need liberation from the yoke of oppression that we are enacting. And I think oftentimes we can forget, we can we can mistake um, the person for the whole. And I wonder, how do we build a politics that is in fervent opposition to the state of Israel, but it holds at its core, as Monalisa beautifully said, this hope that Israeli Jews will be safe, will live side by side in equality with Palestinians, will live side by side in equality with Christian, Muslim neighbors, equals. Um, and I think it's this way in which, the Palestinian writer Hassan Kanafani writes in one of his stories, El Insan Huwa Qadiyya, a person is a cause. Um, and I think that a lot of people are not lost causes. I think even though and I think oftentimes, obviously, we all have to do our own assessments. If there's someone who's yelling at you at a school board and telling you that the kufiyya is anti-Semitic, that might not be the person with whom we.
It wasn't me specifically, but they had said that the seeing a kufi is anti-Semitic to them,
Right.
like it.
Right.
And I was really surprised because this person is quite often enabled in our school system.
Mhm.
Like this person makes such a huge impact in regards to the policies of our Arab and Muslim students.
Mhm.
Very and fervently very supports a Zionist projects and its investment in our school systems. Like she will allow groups about the Holocaust, which happened, talk about the current onslaught of violence towards Israel, like against the people they're oppressing, but she highlights it in a frame of like barbarity.
Mhm.
Highlights it in a frame of these people can't be reasoned with and rationed with. And for me, when you look at the education, the the artistry, the music that comes from Palestinians and Palestinian around the world, and this art is inspired by our pain of being in diaspora, watching the suffering of our family members, really create some community, but at the same time, this person shouldn't be allowed in positions of power. And that's the thing you're talking about, is a lot of people are making these incredibly horrible decisions about Palestinians, about Israelis, and the future of the occupation in Israel, and the future of Palestinians in Gaza, and the right of return of the ones around the world are not us, the people who are actively jeopardizing our lives, our relationships, our community relationships. They don't have an insight in it. They do it because they just want to. They have financial incentive, military incentive. It's all about capital, the exploitation of indigenous bodies, and we really need to, like you said, boycott and divest and sanction, because it does help Israelis who are in the streets. From what I see, demonstrating in Tel Aviv, I see them, we hear them, but if their government isn't like listening to them, who's driving the wheel? Who's contributing to the genocide machine that is both hurting the Jewish community in Israel and the Palestinian communities around the world in general, and their allies?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel in my own life. I mean, in my own life, I don't know. It feels like this daily question: how much energy does one expend trying to sort of bring someone down from the ledge of brainwash? Or how much do we say, like, I wish you well, I'm moving away from you and trying to make sure your voice is not platformed in the same way? I don't know. Albert, do you have wisdom on that question? How do you speak to someone who is so caught in wrong thinking? When do you know when to try to look toward the tender parts of them? When do you say,
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean
no,
it directly at you. I meant it as
no,
like
no,
an
no, not
open,
at all.
open
Not at
comment.
all. No,
Okay,
I
good.
didn't. I didn't. Yeah, I think it's
I didn't want it to make it seem that way.
not at all.
So I wrote a play, and I performed it 7 times, I guess, in the territory here, including at the NAC and other locations. And in the play, I talk about the Indian Act and how it impacted my grandfather's generation and how it impacted my father's generation. And they endured lots. The Indian Act directed that they would, even though they were sober, honest, hardworking Christians, they had to go and see a white man, for instance, to be able to leave the community. If they wanted to work in a lumber camp, or if they wanted to go and work as a fishing guide, they had to get permission. And our spirituality was outlawed until almost mid 1950s. We never got the right to vote till 1960 federally, and 1968 in the province of Quebec. And I tell people in the play that I wouldn't have put up with it. Like, the idea of rebelling, a violent protest against the government, really wasn't part of something my grandfather or my dad were capable of. But I would have been capable of it,
Yeah.
because it's just normal and natural to fight back. And I wouldn't have wanted my kids and my grandchildren to live under the oppression of something like that, against like the Indian Act. So it's, but if the Indian Act wouldn't have settled down at the time that I became of age, and if it was still as it was in my father's generation, my grandfather's generation, and if I would have fought back against it, I would have been called a terrorist. I would have been labeled a terrorist. And what was that what I'd be? A terrorist? Because I fight back against oppression? It's normal and natural to do so. it's in a human being.
Mm.
You could only be pushed so far. A human being can only be pushed so far, and then they fight back. Anything will fight back. Somebody said a corner a mouse and you're tormented. It's even the mouse is going to fight back. So it's just anything that's alive will fight back if it's being attacked over and over and over and over again. It's just natural.
Mm-hmm.
So these things are on my mind all the time whenever I think about things in the world where the oppression of a segment of the community, and that community fights back, and it depends on who's in control of propaganda. It's like Ireland, where the IRA fought back for generations against the British. The British they felt they were being occupied, and they did what they felt was the right thing to do. Gee, I think if people have any questions or comments, I don't know, Lindsay, if this is a good time to do that.
Yeah, I did want to jump in before we got too far away from what Monalisa was saying about the school board and the kafia, because Marianne jumped in to say that the school board trustee called it an act of aggression. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know there was a letter signing campaign. I think the school board trustee wanted wearing the keffiyeh to be not allowed within school board meetings or schools, and that was canceled, right? I think that's what happened. Correct me if I'm wrong. Marianne probably knows more. But I thought I saw that the good letter writing campaign worked, and that did not happen, and people are allowed to wear a keffiyeh still. Sylvia was going back to the boycott. Yes, using our privilege, our money to divest, boycott. Oh, Marianne got kicked out, is coming back. Sorry. Yes, using our privilege, our money to divest, boycott, and sanction are the best ways to bring oppressors to heel. Truly, it's how South Africa finally capitulated. That might be a word I've never said out loud. Did I say that right? Capitulated? Okay. And Western countries were happy to do so. Why aren't we doing the same thing to Israel? I don't know if someone wants to speak to that, and then I'll jump back. There's more school board stuff after that. So the idea of, if anyone wanted to add, you don't have to have anything to add to it, but yeah, that's how South Africa finally capitulated. Western countries were happy to do so. Why aren't we doing the same thing to Israel?
Yeah, I think I would say in this particular context, right, there is I don't know everyone on this call, but I assume that many of you are not Palestinian and not Jewish. And I think there's an interesting nuance here. I think the South Africa model in some ways is a really good one. And I think there is a real power in sort of the nonviolent tactics of boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And then I'm also curious if there's this way in which, I find myself, and I can't always muster it myself, but for those of us who feel that they have some kind of excess well of a little leftover compassion, right? If someone feels like they're at their limit, then I trust that. I trust that you're at your limit, and then I support the campaign to boycott or divest without necessarily trying to engage with folks who are still enmeshed in Zionism. But I'm curious, in a space like this, is there a way to sort of do that messaging, sort of not and it may not be received easily, but to say like this boycott or this divestment is done also for the sake of Israelis, which is, I think, a thing people don't hear. And the reason I say there's this nuance from South Africa is knowing from within the sort of confines of Jewish history and Jewish relationship, particularly to the Christian West, there is this sense that our existence is demonized from the get-go. And so there can be this sense of like, Do I Moriel, think that someone wearing a keffiyeh is committing active anti-Semitism? No, that's absurd. That's a ridiculous proposal. But do I believe that some people believe that when they say it? Yes. Do I believe that the propaganda makers who create that messaging believe it? No. I think there are the cynical message makers. But do I believe that there are individuals who see the keffiyeh and feel scared and feel that there is something in this kafia saying that if you are a Jewish person, who hasn't checked all the 100 boxes, then you're not welcome here. Your life doesn't matter to us. And I don't know.
I'm, I mean, I would say that the kufiya feels more of a threat to Zionists than it does to Jews, because I know I have a lot of Jewish allies. I work
Obviously,
with
yeah,
independent Jewish voices quite a bit, and a lot of them have different variations of the kufiya. I
completely,
think
completely.
in the context of like the kufiya is heritage,
Yeah,
and you have like the different what each one means.
yeah,
The fishing, the trading roads,
yeah, yeah,
the olive trees. So for us, it's what really makes Palestine Palestine to us, or in general, ask any Syrian or Lebanese or Iraqi person or Egyptian person, they'll tell you like Palestine's like olive trees, the trade routes, the fishing industry, all of it. It's a connection to a heritage that I will never be able to experience. And for Palestinians to wear it, it's really the closest connection for us in diaspora have to our ancestors who were displaced.
yeah.
And the same exact thing with the Tatris and Thopes.
Mhm.
So I feel like if there was to be any concept of boycott, divest, and sanctioning externally with Israel or for Israelis, it would have to start within Israel by people actively boycotting within the country.
Yeah.
Like
Which
it would
and,
have to
and that
necessarily start not as
and that
I know,
doesn't.
I'm just yeah, I know it does. That's why it would have to be more aggressive and more impactful. And I feel like the country by itself really does put a lot of Israelis in tough spots. So, like, I've never been, so I can only imagine how, like, some people fight against the system or not, but I can only speak for myself as a Palestinian, a Canadian here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, yeah, beautiful. And I think that's such an important point that like the fact that some people see this and feel afraid, it by no means that anyone should take a keffiyeh off. Every single campaign saying ban the keffiyeh is a campaign of wrong-mindedness and deserves not to be taken seriously. My question is whether there is a way that the person who is reacting from a place of fear, reacting from a place of mistaken perception, reaction from a place of brainwash, how do we bring them over? And I don't know. And I'm not, and certainly I feel like I don't even want to put that pressure on Palestinians right now who are surviving
I
a
mean,
genocide.
I,
But I feel like, yeah.
I can't, sorry, I just keep cutting out, that's all.
No, no worries. I was just saying sort of like, yeah, I don't feel like that's the job of Palestinians who are surviving a genocide and witnessing their people suffering under genocide. I don't think it's anyone's job. I'm just curious if this space, particularly sort of non-Jewish, non-Palestinian Canadians who feel empathy, are there ways to sort of articulate to Zionists, this is not a campaign against your existence as a human, it's a campaign against the ideology that you've been swept up by.
To be honest, Palestinians aren't doing the job because a lot of our allies are. You have a lot of really great independent community groups who are working within different other, I guess, Jewish community organizations as well to kind of show that you call it like Israel, Zionism and Judaism are not the same, and that their conflation really only furthers colonial and settler projects. That the Israeli identity of people they can't control that they're Israeli, but they can control how they can use their Israeli citizenship in the same way a person would use their American citizenship to kind of contribute to the liberation of like their neighbor, technically the occupying neighbor,
Yeah.
like the neighbor they're currently occupying. And it's such a big idea. It's a huge concept. And we're obviously people who have a middle ground of knowing what we want for the future of our communities. But at the same exact time, our hands can't are relatively tied because we don't have access to the spaces where we can enact legislation or policy changes. Like we actively know that, and this is like just a little segue, that the US military export is one of the biggest in the world. Canadian parts are also being sold to the occupation to enact these concepts. Our countries aren't taking like a stance towards these. So it's up to Palestinians and their allies here, as well as I know there's a lot of Israelis who are enacting the same exact type of blockades and destruction within their communities to stop these weapon sales. That's enacting around the whole entire world. But the biggest problem is the enabling of the members of our parliament or members of, like, I guess, the Knesset who actively make decisions where the violences continue, jeopardizing the lives of Jewish Israelis, jeopardizing the lives of like Palestinians abroad who are under surveillance and occasional like suppression, and Israelis who are under the same exact suppression and surveillance. It really falls down to us working as a community or communities to benefit our stances or our progression in these policies.
Yeah, beautifully said. Thank you for that.
Should I jump to the next? Oh, Albert, did you want to go in? Jump in?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
The if you want an answer to that question about why is the world treating Israel different than South Africa, for instance, you're going to have to ask any leader of any country that's complicit that question and let them answer. How are we supposed to answer that? We're people who stand against genocide wherever it's taking place, and whoever we condemn whoever's perpetrating it, and we support the people who have suffered oppression and are fighting back. To me, that's not a crime. It's just a thing of a natural human reaction to situations like that on this planet. I don't. I can't see the country, a little place like Palestine, that has such a small population. They've got no navy. They've got no air force. They've got no submarines. They've got no military to speak of. You know, and they're fighting against the whole world. You know, am I wrong in saying that? Because Britain, Canada, United States, Australia, how many countries are complicit that have sent money and bombs to kill the population in Gaza? If I lived to be 1,000 years old, I'd never be able to figure it out. And why the world is world leaders are on board with it, and they're complicit, and they think they're doing the right thing, I guess. But I'd like to ask them what's the difference and see what they'd answer.
I don't know if they think they're doing the right thing. I think it's just the political pressure. I mean, when I just sort of did a quick Google search and actually saw that the US only supported divestment from South Africa in 1986, and the apartheid regime, I think, right, apartheid became the official policy of the South African regime, I believe, in the 50s. Is that right? Someone can correct my facts, but it's, you know, and I hope that the speed of shift in public opinion vis-a-vis Israel-Palestine is going to be much faster than 3 decades of student activism and cultural activism. And so I don't think we're at a hopeless moment, in a sense that, you know, I think if you look at South Africa in 1984, I don't think anyone would have said, you know, Nelson Mandela will be released from prison and president of the country within less than a decade.
I was going to kind of raise the same thing, but starting with I'm not an expert in exactly how everything happened in South Africa, but I don't, you giving me that fact confirms what I was thinking, and that I don't think the government's led this at all. I don't know that they were in support, especially because I do know the fact that Nelson Mandela was still listed as a terrorist by the US until 2008, I think it was, or 2007. So is it just the people power that leads it and then the governments come behind? And yeah, that's a year before Mandela became president. What did it look like? And
Mm.
yeah, really interesting. And I have more learning to do for sure. Jumping back to some comments. So we're going back to kind of the school board now. Our leaders in our public schools don't have any courage, spineless to stand up to Zionist pressure. They are scared. And then here's a very big, important information that we have to share. So if everyone wants to take this from the chat, I'll also put the Google Drive on our link tree for the Harmony Circles so everyone can have it. But this is from Marianne. Our Ontario Education Workers Caucus has published a scathing report demonstrating an epidemic of anti-Palestinian racism in Ontario public schools. 65 delegations to school boards across the province were documented and analyzed to show rampant genocide denial, erasure, and retaliation against advocates. The report includes a legal note from the Legal Center for Palestine and recommendations for the province adopted from organized, there's something blocking that. I think it says Palestinian families, like Toronto Palestinian families. You can read the full report below. Please help by amplifying the social media post below too. So Marianne has shared the report, shared it on Twitter, X, shared it on Instagram. So we will make sure that those links are available on the link tree for our Harmony Circles. Then Marianne also shared readthemaple.com. You're literally brainwashed. Jewish school students speak out. So that is another article that we can share. Sylvia said, awesome article, so good, literally brainwashing, and it's so easy to do, especially with the speed that misinformation can be shared. And Marianne, we have all been duped in the false histories here and abroad. The screams of the oppressed fell on very deaf ears. Fall continue. In South Africa, the white communities actually felt enough discomfort that they conceded after the nonstop student and ally pressure. South Africa needed the cheap labor. Their leisure was affected. Some more learning there. I think I caught up to that all. That was a lot.
I have a question for Moriel.
Yeah.
I just want to know, like, and this is just my curiosity as like someone who is actively trying to like work and fight for Palestinians and against their country's complicity with like the violence going on.
Yeah.
Your relationship with your friends and family, how is that? I mean, I
Yeah.
have to ask it myself
No,
because in a way of like,
thank you. Yeah, thank you for asking that. It's awful. It feels really alienating. I think I've been feeling, for a long time. My politics shifted a long time ago. When I was 22, I refused to serve in the military. I'm 35 now, so I've been involved in sort of left anti-apartheid activism for coming up on a decade and a half. But I really felt like in this last year and a half of the genocide, it like the best metaphor I can say is like it feels like people I love are on this ship and they are like floating further and further and further into an alternate reality. Right, that we read different news sources, the things that I understand and believe to be true, they say no, that's all propaganda, it's all made up, it's not true. Sometimes I try to sort of bridge the gap and share, and a lot of times I just feel like numb and disconnected and heartbroken. And of course, I have other family members who align with me. I'm not the only one in my family member who sees things as I do. There are lots of family members and friends also. Like I have beloved friends who are sort of in some of these communities that you're talking about, Monalisa, sort of folks living in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem who are involved in anti-apartheid organizing, anti-war organizing. They are not the majority, and won't be the majority until politics shift deeper, but there are, there are these friends who I feel like are almost this kind of like lifeline, and we're trying to hang on to a string from this ship in which our loved ones are, and it really feels like, my my friend and I had this joke. This is a friend of mine, also like a Jewish Israeli leftist, and we had this um kind of joking but also very serious analysis, which is like contemporary Israeli society sees itself as similar to LA and is actually similar to North Korea. Right? The sense like there's this self-perception, like, no, we're living in a free society, we're reading the media and going to cafes, and we're not, we can say what we want and go what we want, but actually it feels more adjacent to like an alternate reality, to imagine how someone, you know, understands reality from within the North Korean propaganda system. Obviously, I don't know that much about North Korea. I've read a few novels and read some testimonies, but it feels like people I love are living in this truly alternate reality. And I think someone mentioned in the comments the sort of speed of misinformation. There's a way in which, if your social media is inundated with all sorts of things and you're not pausing to check a bunch of news sources. Al Jazeera was banned in Israel. The entire news source, and I think also I was saying earlier, if the Israeli government were really at ease with what was going on, why aren't foreign journalists allowed into Gaza? Um, if there really was no compunction about what was happening, why are journalists being killed at a rate unprecedented in conflicts in this century? And I think there is this sense that there has to be this maintenance of this alternate reality for the war machine to continue to function. How do we chip through it? I don't know. I hope through art, I hope through conversation, but I don't know. Um, and so I feel a little lost, honestly.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel on some level, like I can't say that I experienced what you've experienced, but there is healing through like the communal appreciation that we know what's wrong and that we're aware of it. And though people we've had to disconnect from and no longer have in our lives, they mean a lot to us. I now understand like your concept of like how do we try to remove like or remove proxy of our friends away from Zionism or Zionist propaganda and help them see what we're trying to show them. Because we know on some intrinsic level there's some good to them. Just why can they not see the good of this person, place, or thing? And I personally think it's just deeply rooted in like racism. But that's what like the Zionist propaganda, like the Zionist machine is, given its inception, and the specifically targeting Jewish communities in Europe, forcibly migrating quite a bit of them into Palestine, and then expediting that in a way. We look at the Jews and Muslims and Christians who suffered all these displacement of like what was once harmony. We no longer have that. Just have a bunch of incredibly warring communities who are fractured in so many tiers, and that's like loss of connection and community. Where do we find our way back? I think starts with us acknowledging that we're kind of lost, and that loss doesn't come because we're lost or we have no hope, but the people who make the policies, the people who kind of created our lives for us in a way, the laws, the school, the education really forms us. And we have to remove ourselves from these systems, but the same system exists. All of the systems that are based on colonialism and imperialism still exist, and that really is what our school systems or governments, our laws are based on, these really old forms of laws that were initially discriminatory. Like the fact that people have to gain their rights as opposed to just having them, that women and trans folks, sorry, have to get their rights back, petition for their rights, claim they exist, show validity is insane. Like we deserve rights as human beings. Like we both bleed red, which I say quite frequently, but you draw the line at a specific you you draw the line at specific race, religion, creed, culture. That's it's just barbaric.
Yeah. Yeah, I am really compelled by this idea of like there's this it feels like this tension to me, and I'm just throwing out this idea like there's okay. Like when we're lost, we need to like link up with each other and like keep trying to move forward, find our way out of the lostness. But then there are other moments that we're going to be encountered where actually we need to sort of like go limp and not comply, right? When someone says, I don't know, I'm not sure what the example would be, but I think there are times for like where we have to like walk forward together and times where we have to sort of like flop down. And I think part of the confusion that I'm feeling is like some moments call for this and some call for that. And I feel like I don't know about all of you, but I feel like I'm like scrambling around on like an hourly basis almost of like, should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do this? Should I do that? I don't know. Just curious if anyone has thoughts on that.
I mean, I think the confusion comes from, personally for me, the confusion of not knowing what to do is that we see so much potential in how different parts of our communities were involved in our moving, and we want to support them to the best of our ability. And we have to decide where our energy is best suited in that moment. And I think right now, the and I mean this like our discussion aside, is a lot of our attention should go towards like making sure there are Palestinians left in Gaza, making sure there's Palestinians left in Palestine. And that is really like we can talk about what we should do next, but we know for a fact that food, hygiene, medical care is super important, and that's the one thing they're being denied. The one thing that our governments will debate and debate. Because I had a 20-minute call with my member of parliament a couple of weeks ago, and it was very disheartening to hear them claim that they want democracy and peace. And but I'm like, but you have to understand we're actively funding the weapons that are participating in starving and colonizing and murdering children. Like I can't advocate, you cannot advocate for peace, you cannot advocate for freedom and democracy when you're not enacting any of the freedoms or democracies. You want peace for your people, but your people are grieving. Your community that you remind their support, that you require their support when they vote for you, they're grieving because they're seeing something they cannot control. And that's where we are, is we're helpless in some ways because we know what happens when you don't eat. We know what happens when you have an infection. Like there's the amount of information and sciences that go into like disinfecting like this food, but we can't. And that's why we have this sense of hopelessness. But I am hopeful that through open dialogue such as what we're having right now, and your novel, and the work we do within our communities, will get us to where we're supposed to go, or guide us in a direction. I guess where there's least resistance is where we should go.
Beautiful. I think that Albert has unmuted. Yep, you want to jump in?
I do. What's on my mind is this, that I really believe that Netanyahu and his war cabinet and all the warmongers in Israel are they're like vampires whose bloodlust it's impossible to satisfy. They will thirst for that Palestinian blood until there's no Palestinian human being left in that area of the Middle East. And it's another thing that popped into my mind actually is that Kamala Harris could have been the first female president of the United States of America if the Democrats would have had a different position the genocide of the Palestinians. They were so involved and complicit, and it just went from one presidency to the next, with the next one being even more vicious than the Democrats thought possible. But ultimately, they both had the same goals: to wipe out innocent Palestinians, no matter how many innocent children would be killed. That was irrelevant. The propaganda called them animals, anyways, and scum. And whenever you think about it that way, with those citizens of Israel that are okay with massacres and slaughtering and genocide, do they think that after it's all over and done with, that they're going to be at peace? Do you think there's never going to be any kind of outside forces that are always going to be intent on revenge or attacking Israel? Like, who's going to feel safe there? The opportunity is to have a two-state solution and to make peace somehow, and help the Palestinians rebuild and let them live their lives in peace. Finally, stop oppression. That's the son of an Israeli general said it. I think whenever we were first formed the Harmony Circle, he said, "You will never end aggression without first ending oppression." And truer words were never spoken.
All right, Moriel, we have 4 minutes left. Do you want to, can I say one last thing and then Albert to close, or?
Yeah, I think just the question that I'm sitting with is, I don't know any politicians personally. I don't have any interest in knowing them. I don't know what happens to a person when they get that much power and how it distorts a human soul. But I do think that, you know, average people, average citizens, even the ones who think they are in support of massacre, even ones who are carrying it out, I think there is some part in people that knows that what is happening is not okay. And this is sort of going back to this question of like, if the Israeli government really felt like the population was all on board, then why ban journalists, right? If the Israeli government felt like everyone would sign off no matter what, why ban Al Jazeera? Why is it that when you're in Tel Aviv, you cannot type into your browser aljazeera.com, right? Because there is a knowledge that the individual person, maybe not the career politician, maybe not the career general, but the individual person, um, something in them, something in them knows that what is happening is beyond. And exactly like Monalisa said, something in every person knows that to starve another person is at odds with what it means to be an empathetic human. To deprive another person of medicine, to deprive another person of medical care, to deprive another person of food and water. And so I guess my question, and I don't have a good answer, but my question is how do we get stories through not only to those who already are with us firm in their knowing of what is happening, but how do we also get stories through to people who part of them are flashing in this noise, telling them things are okay, when there's another part of them, like there was a part of me, right? Like there was a part of me at age 19. Part of me was planning on joining the Israeli military because that was what I dreamed of since I was a kid. And there was another part of me that was sort of flashing this quiet voice in the back of my mind and my heart saying something's off, something's not okay. And it was thanks to storytellers, thanks to Palestinian activists, thanks to writers, poets, that I was sort of released from this sort of trance. And I think that's my question for all of us of how do we make it so that stories reach maybe not the most hardened. um, I don't think that our storytelling is going to shift Netanyahu or Donald Trump or Joe Biden or
Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris. Right. I don't think our storytelling will shift them, but I wonder, how do we shift one another? How do we shift our friends, our colleagues?
I I don't think we can personally shift people's perspective.
No.
I know that for all of us, like for you, the evidence must have been glaring like in you 24/7 before you like just got up to your face and you may have known. I was like, I'm not you, but a lot of times in situations where you don't want to admit to something, you can't help but notice it till it's like up in your face. Or the other bit is if a person is like, how do I explain this? If a person is benefiting from whatever project, expansion, occupation, they're not going to be inclined to lose that power. In any abusive relationship, like abusive power is never relinquished willingly. It's usually by force or by ultimatums. And essentially, we have this abusive power between us and forms of capitalism and patriarchy and misogyny and like and these like different empires, and we really have to leave it up to people being like, yes, we know there's something wrong. I think a lot of us most of the time acknowledge there's something wrong, and that's why they had a lot of people be like, I was just following orders is a form of a cop out.
Right.
I think you would have to be really blind at this point or willfully ignorant, and I mean this with respects to like this is general, not a target, but you have to be willfully ignorant in how it's approached. Sorry. Like willfully ignorant in how you go about liberating Palestinians or liberating yourself. That you know there's a problem, and I feel we're in this space that we've raised so much awareness, so much activism over the last 2 years. Because if you told me 20 years took South Africa and Vietnam took 11, with the way technology is now, it's taken us half the time to raise all of this attention and awareness about Palestine and its occupation, and even the surrounding countries. Like if you wanted to expand it, and like Israel's expanding into other countries as well. Yeah. Some Israelis would like that, other Israelis are like, absolutely not. I just want us to like stay here because this will bring us attention to us. Like we as Israelis who live here, who have no part of like military or like in the policies, are going to be affected. So it really comes down to people have to acknowledge their accountability in the machine and go from there and petition the members, speak to their families. And like we were talking, there's a form of rejection when your family doesn't want to acknowledge what you see or what you observe, or the people around you shun you because you don't agree with them anymore. It's just part of human nature to be ostracized for being different. It's sticking to knowing what's right outbeats herd mentality, I guess.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I think, although I would love to keep the talk going all night, Albert, do you want to close? We do have to wrap up. But I think we should have to bring Moriel back again. Yeah. But Albert, in closing?
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to say as an Algonquin and as coming from a race of people who almost disappeared, that I'm grateful for everyone on this call and all the people in this territory and on this planet who weren't afraid to renounce a genocide of innocent human beings. It does bring peace to my heart. It does give me hope, and I'm very humble to know each and every one of you, and I hope I see you soon. And with that, I want to say to the good spirit Minu Manitou, how grateful we are for everything that went well tonight. We're grateful for everything that was shared, everything that was learned. We're especially grateful for the kindness in the hearts of these people on this call. And we ask you now, good spirit, to watch over us until we arrive to that place where we will rest tonight. We ask that whenever we arrive there, that we fill that space with love, health, and joy. Miigwech, I hope I see you soon.